working in indirect handover with the Crew-11 crew on the ground and getting up to speed as much as possible ahead of their arrival to the space station.
This includes training on emergency procedures and the ins and outs of space station, but once they actually arrive on board, they will go through a more direct handover and training with NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who has been on the space station since November. These handovers between crews allow for continuity of the activities and helps to ensure a continuous U.S. presence on the space station, which we recently celebrated a major milestone of 25 years of continuous presence aboard the International Space Station. So what that means is if you are younger than 25 years old, you have never known a moment in your life where there have not been humans living off the planet, which is an incredible feat. Continuing to get some good views of Dragon Freedom as it makes its approach to the space station. The next burn that we are looking ahead towards is the Midcourse burn, which will be at the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And this mid-course burn is more of a fine-tuning burn to ensure that the trajectory of Dragon is right on line ahead of docking. Again, we are targeting docking at 12:12 p.m. Pacific time for Crew-12.
Dragon SpaceX for 4.011.
SpaceX Dragon, go.
Ground is ready for suit leak checks, so you are go to start with step 2.1. Waiting for your call in 2.2, and then we'll give you a go.
Dragon copies, we'll get in 2.1 and give you a call, or 2.2.
Again, those were just some comms between the core and the Crew-12 crew. They are working through some very specific procedures that they're...
SpaceX Dragon, we're ready to pressurize in 2.2.
SpaceX copies, you are go for commanding in 2.3, initiate suit leak check.
Dragon is initiating suit leak check.
Again, the crew is working through some procedures, and as you just heard, they are working through a suit leak check. This is just to make sure that they've got all their suits on, and they're just going to make sure that they have a good suit leak check in preparation for when they close their visors during the approach portion to the International Space Station. We are continuing to get some pretty cool views from the International Space Station looking at Dragon. That is Dragon Freedom with the Crew-12 crew still on board.
And as Dragon approaches, we will get a clearer and sharper image of Dragon Freedom, but you are starting to be able to make out the nose cone, which is open and has remained open since shortly after launch. And this helps to expose all the guidance.
Dragon SpaceX, looks like we're low on suit 3. Can we go ahead and halt the suit leak check and we'll try again?
It looks like we are in a brief period of handover between our satellites, and we'll regain views and communication with the crew here shortly. They are continuing to step through those procedures and leak checks, which again, they remain suited and seated all the way through the docking portion. And then once they dock to the International Space Station, they will be able to get out of their spacesuits and work through hatch opening procedures. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is going to be prime for hatch opening procedures on the space station side. And then following that, the crew will be able to float on board the International Space Station for
Dragon SpaceX. For awareness, we're about to come up on a TDRS handover on Dragon to ground. This next TDRS pass will start at about 1849. That's 1849. At this time, I'll have crew execute step 2.8 to investigate suit 3, and we'll follow up for the next suit leak check at 1849.
All right, Dragon copy. You want us to execute the troubleshoot steps now, and we'll do another leak check after the TDRS pass at 1849.
Good readback. Talk to you then.
And those were just some comms. They are currently doing or performing suit leak checks. They did have a call that there was a low pressure on suit 3, and they are currently troubleshooting that. In about 5 minutes or so, we should hear they should be trying that suit leak check again, and we should be hearing those comms again for that procedure.
That's right. And while we wait for our next milestone, let's take a moment to meet our crew. In the commander's seat is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, who spent a total of 205 days in space on her first space flight back in 2019 and was part of the first all-female spacewalks. She holds a biology degree from Brown University. Next to Meir is pilot Jack Hathaway, who's making his first flight to space. The Connecticut native earned bachelor's degrees in physics and history from the U.S. Naval Academy, and he has more than 2,500 flight hours in 30 types of aircraft and has flown 39 combat missions during several military operations.
Serving as a mission specialist is Sophie Adenau, representing the European Space Agency, or ESA. The French native studied engineering and specialized in spacecraft and aircraft flight dynamics during undergraduate work in France and received her master's degree from MIT. This will also be her first trip to space. Rounding out this crew is Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Andrei Fedyaev. As a major in the Russian Air Force, he's logged more than 500 hours in Russian aircraft. Back in 2023, he launched as a mission specialist as part of Crew-6, where he spent nearly 186 days aboard the International Space Station.
And that's a look at the crew that is currently aboard Crew Dragon Freedom as they look ahead towards docking at 12 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. The crew did launch on Friday the 13th, just yesterday, and they did launch at 5:15 a.m. Eastern, 2:15 here in Pacific time. It was a beautiful launch from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida.
Yeah, and the crew, again, as we were just mentioning, they were performing suit leak checks. They're still currently in that procedure. Again, they had a low pressurization in suit 3, so they are troubleshooting that as we speak. And at the 10:49 minute mark, they're going to try that suit leak check one more time. And again, they do this to make sure that the suits are good and ready to go, that they don't have leaks while they're docking to the International Space Station. So we should see that coming up in about a couple minutes, and we're going to check in with our partner over there at NASA's Johnny Space Center, Leah Cheshire. How's it going, Leah?
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon actually, here in Johnson Space Center. We're at the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where everyone here is gearing up for this afternoon's docking and looking forward to having Crew-12 aboard the station soon. So Dragon's approach will be monitored both here on the ground and from the space station's cupola using special software to track the spacecraft's approach and making sure it stays in the expected zones. Now, once Dragon is docked, NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be be primed to start hatch opening operations. He's going to start by opening the large hatch on Node 2 Zenith, which is where the spacecraft's docking today, and that'll give him access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will also pressurize the vestibule, and that's the small space between the hatch on Dragon and the space station. This area, of course, was previously exposed to vacuum prior to docking, so the crew will need to fill it with air and make sure its pressure is nearly equal with the atmospheric pressure on Dragon and on the station side. Williams will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into that vestibule, while flight controllers here in Houston will monitor and verify the pressure readings to make sure that everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. Today on console in Mission Control Houston, we have NASA Flight Director Brandon Lloyd and the Orbit 2 team on console. For Dragon's approach and docking, to the right of Lloyd is our Capcom. That's the capsule communicator, Jacob Lesarge. He is not speaking with the crew on Dragon, but is instead talking with the crew aboard the station. We currently have 3 crew members living and working on the orbiting laboratory, and of course that's going to jump to 7 once the Crew-12 crew members arrive. Again, we're really excited to get those crew members aboard soon, and for now, that's the latest from here in Mission Control Houston. So I'll send it back over to Sandra and Jesse in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Leah. It's great to hear that everything is proceeding as expected over in Mission Control. We are looking ahead towards that AI mid-course burn 11 minutes from now at the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Pacific.
And again, we are just waiting for confirmation of that second suit leak check that the crew will be performing. Should be any minute now that we should start hearing comms about that. And coming up, once Dragon arrives at 400 meters.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground for suit leak checks.
Dragon's listening.
All right, just want to confirm if you were able to step through all substeps of 2.8 for the suit openings and verified closed, and if you reported anything found.
We stepped through everything. It looked like my right glove may have had been only half a white tooth, but that's the only abnormality we found on all the zippers.
Okay, copy that. Looking at that zipper, just for my awareness, did we look at the umbilical at all, or the O-rings?
Yeah, we did. We looked at the umbilical, the O-rings looked good, all those connections looked good, and then we looked at the suit, the visor as well, and that seal looks decent.
Okay, copy. At that point, we're more than likely going to be ready to step into the next suit leak check. Standby 1 will get ready on the ground, and I'll give you a call. If you can go ahead and return to step 2.1 and give me a go when you guys are ready to pressurize, and we'll be giving you that go shortly.
Got it.
And then we heard the comms that they have been checking anything with the suit where there is a seal on the suit. So they sound.
SpaceX Dragon, we're ready to pressurize for suit leak check in 2.2.
All right, SpaceX copies on Dragon to ground. You are go for commanding. Initiate suit leak check.
Dragon.
And they are reperforming that suit leak check on pilot Jack Hathaway's suit. They did check the umbilicals, the O-rings, which are seals that help keep everything nice and tight and prevents leaks. Sounds like everything has checked out well so far. Potentially the glove zipper may have just not been closed all the way. So they're reperforming that suit leak check to see if we can get a good pressurization on Jack Hathaway's suit.
And coming up here shortly, once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below space station, it will be at what is known as Waypoint 0, and that will be the first checkpoint during our approach. The spacecraft can hold here at 400 meters, but if all of its systems check out, Dragon can continue its approach to Waypoint 1. Dragon's move from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1 will swing it up and over top of the space station, arriving at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which is essentially directly in front of the docking port. The crew are headed to the Zenith port on Space Station, which is the port that is facing space. Dragon has docked to Node 2, also known as Harmony, for all of our crewed missions so far, because that's where both international docking adapters are located.
And we did get confirmation that we did get a good suit leak check on Jack Hathaway's suit, so great news. Once Dragon is only 20 meters at waypoint 2, the spacecraft focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter. We may hear the call out CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point, a little less than 30 seconds before docking, and at this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon.
And then the moment we've all been waiting for, the grand arrival, when our crew arrives at the International Space Station. Dragon will fly in and make contact with that IDA, giving us what we call soft capture. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place to give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to its new home on the space station. The station crew, namely NASA astronaut Chris Williams, will then manually pressurize the vestibule, or the area between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch. Meanwhile, umbilicals that provide power, audio, and data connections from the station to Dragon are put in place. Then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come a little more than 2 hours following docking.
Yeah, we are just about an hour and 15 minutes or so from that expected docking time with the International Space Station. It's a little bit of a long process. They have been coasting for quite a while now, but I'm sure the crew is very excited to make it to the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon, 4 nominal suits.
SpaceX copies and concurs. Good news, Jack. We see 4 healthy suits.
And with that confirmation, we heard...
Great. Yeah, we're just as happy about that as well, and that's the end of this procedure. Thanks.
SpaceX copies. Exiting 4.011. We'll go back to approach monitoring. Next event will be the mid-course maneuver coming up. Per your forward view, just about 4.5 minutes.
Dragon.
So again, we did get 4 good suit leak checks on board for Crew Dragon Freedom as we get closer to docking at targeted for 12:12 p.m. Pacific time today. Just before we lost views there, we did see Dragon on our screen briefly. From time to time, we do have handover between our satellites, and so we'll momentarily lose views and communications, but we will regain that here shortly.
Yeah, and we did have to reperform those suit leak checks, but we do have, even though they're following very specific procedures, we do make sure that there's time within the procedure to make sure that we have the time to do any troubleshooting that's needed. And we did have that time, and we're able to get some good suit leak checks and no changes to the schedule. Which is exactly why we make sure the timeline is what it is and allow some extra time for, you know, those some small off-nominal things to occur.
And the crew is in their spacesuits during what we call dynamic phases of flight. That includes the launch period, as well as when they are approaching the space station and docking to the International Space Station. And so leak checks are done during all of those phases of flight to ensure that the suit can pressurize if need be. And again, we did hear 4 good suit leak checks there. So our crew is well on their way to the International Space Station following their launch from Florida yesterday on Friday the 13th. And we do have views there of our screen. You might see some lights on Dragon. Those red and green lights, they actually indicate the direction of Dragon. So the red is the port side of Dragon, and the green is the starboard side. The white light is the top of Dragon, and the yellow is on bottom. And all of those are exposed because the nose cone is open, and as we discussed previously, that does hold all of the docking equipment and navigational sensors as Dragon continues its approach to the International Space Station. So we are standing by for the mid-course maneuver. That's the next burn that we're targeting about 3 minutes from now at 11 a.m. Pacific. And we have been talking about those spacesuits and the leak checks that just were completed. The suit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. If that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a environment that the crew can live and work in long enough for the crew to return home. The flame-resistant materials on the outer layer also protect the crew in the event of a fire. The spacesuits are a custom-tailored single-piece suit, and this means that the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached. The helmet is made from 3D printed nylon and has a visor that pivots open, and the quick disconnect, or QD, on the right thigh mates to an umbilical on the seat. This provides air for ventilation, oxygen, nitrox for pressurization, and allows for the electronics to be connected all from a single location on the suit. A tubing network inside the suit delivers air to the neck and limbs to keep the crew cool while wearing the suit. The suit's communication system consists of helmet-mounted microphones and in-ear speakers, and it takes less than 15 minutes to put on the suit. This new IVA suit design debuted during the Crew-11 mission, and it was worn by NASA astronaut Mike Fink. And there we have in cabin views of our crew in their spacesuits in the new IVA suit, which is designed to incorporate changes developed for the Polaris Dawn mission, which had a extravehicular activity or spacewalk. This new IVA suit design removes the inseam zipper in favor of the EVA suit's spiral zipper design in the suit's torso, which allows the suit to split into an upper and lower half and makes donning and doffing, or taking off and putting on the spacesuit, easier for the crew. The new IVA suit brings all the soft goods joints from the EVA suit into the IVA suit as well, improves the upper arm, elbow, and wrist mobility. So this new design will ultimately help SpaceX scale suit production and aid their ability to manufacture spacesuits in the numbers needed in their goal to make life planetary. So we are standing by for the AI mid-course burn that is now in progress. Again, that mid-course burn is now underway, getting some views inside the spacecraft here.
And Dragon is fully autonomous, so you do see those displays there right in front of them. But as you can tell, they're not doing too much because all they're doing is monitoring. They can see what Dragon is doing as they're approaching the International Space Station. But Dragon is flying them autonomously and performing these maneuvers on its own. Again, we are waiting for that mid-course maneuver burn to begin.
And we did hear confirmation that the mid-course burn has begun, so that burn is in progress.
And again, you can see on your screen, this is a view from the International Space Station looking at Dragon. As you saw earlier, just about 10 or 15 minutes ago, you could see Earth in the background, but now Dragon, as we've been mentioning, is swinging up and over the International Space Station, and that's why you see only space in the background of that view. So this is a view inside of Dragon Freedom's cabin.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Mid-course maneuver complete. Trajectory converged on waypoint 0.
Copy.
Great news that mid-course maneuver burn is now complete.
And so we are just an hour and some change away from docking. Again, we're targeting 12 p.m. Pacific time for today's docking to the Zenith port of the International Space Station. We are getting views back inside Dragon Freedom. On the left of your screen there is the commander of Freedom. That is NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. This is her second space flight. And to her right is NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. He's the pilot of Dragon today, and this is his very first flight in space. You can't see them on your screen there, but to the left of Jessica is ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adano, and then to the right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. This is his second flight to the International Space Station, and we mentioned it before, but he's the first cosmonaut to fly inside Dragon twice.
Now we got to get them some frequent flyer passes.
Yes, he joins the club of a few others that have flown in Dragon more than once. That includes NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, Michael Lopez Alegria, and Peggy Whitson. And we have been checking in from here in Hawthorne, but over in Mission Control Houston, the team is working through a poll as we speak for the go, no-go to continue to approach the International Space Station. The team in Mission Control does a variety of polls as we approach docking, and this happens ahead of launch and any dynamic phases in flight to ensure that all the systems are go, all the...
Again, with a question.
SpaceX here on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX Dragon timeline. Can you give us a new planned docking time? The updated docking time?
Affirm, standby 1.
And so the ground is going to take a look at if the docking time has adjusted at all following the burns that we have been covering this morning. That happens as the trajectory gets aligned ahead of docking. We were targeting a 12:12 p.m. Pacific time docking, but we'll stand by to hear if that has changed and been adjusted based off of the burn that was just completed.
Dragon, SpaceX for expected docking time.
We're ready to copy.
All right, on Dragon to ground, expected time is about 2011. That's 2011.
2011. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
And with that call out, we do have an updated targeted docking time. It is now 12:11 p.m. Pacific for Dragon Freedom to arrive to the Zenith port of the International Space Station and complete its docking. Again, we're targeting 12:11 p.m. Pacific time for docking. So we'll continue to provide updates as we lead up to docking today at 12:11 p.m. Pacific. To take a look back, though, about 45 minutes after liftoff, Dragon executed a phase burn at 3:02 a.m. Pacific, 6:02 a.m. Eastern, to begin fine-tuning its orbit ahead of approach to the International Space Station. Dragon then performed the boost burn at 4:13 a.m. Pacific, or 8:13 a.m. Eastern. This is the first of several major burns required to raise Dragon's orbit and position it for approach to the International Space Station. The boost burn put crew in an orbit where Dragon's apogee, or highest point, is 10 kilometers lower than the space station. But before we can approach the space station, we need Dragon's entire orbit, not just the highest point, to be effectively shadowing the space station. So after that, the close burn at 4:59 a.m. Pacific occurred. That was at 8:59 a.m. Eastern.
The close burn placed Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station, meaning that it was maintaining an orbit roughly 10 kilometers lower than the station the entire way around the Earth. And again, that's in contrast to only being 10 kilometers lower than the station during Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit, which was achieved by the boost burn beforehand.
And from there, at 6:41 a.m. Pacific, 9:41 a.m. Eastern, we executed the third major maneuver known as the transfer burn. And this is where we raised Dragon's apogee, or highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers lower than space station. Then we rounded everything out with a final co-elliptic burn at 7:27 a.m. Pacific, 10:27 a.m. Eastern, to once again maintain a constant orbit lower than the station, this time just 2.5 kilometers meters below. And this was a shorter burn lasting just over 30 seconds. We then had the approach initiation burn, which began the final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. This is also when we started integrated operations between the Dragon control team here in Hawthorne and the space station flight controllers in Mission Control Houston. The teams entered integrated operations prior to the approach initiation occurring.
During the approach, SpaceX's flight controllers work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston to maneuver Dragon to the proper attitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to station. They also activated and tested out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communications with the station using the C2V2 system. C2V2 stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. It sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts aboard the station.
The NASA and SpaceX teams did a go-no-go poll to move Dragon inside the keep-out sphere, which is another checkpoint that consists of an imaginary sphere around station with a radius of 200 meters. Flight controllers use this to monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft, and this is another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for approach 0 and will be enabling the maneuver shortly. Expected approach 0 start at 1921 Zulu. That's 1921 Zulu. Reminder that Dragon will nominally continue approach through waypoint 1 towards waypoint 2.
Go for approach 0, 1921.
And with that poll now wrapped up, we are go for approach to waypoint 0. This poll is another chance to confirm all the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving closer to station.
Station copies all. Begin monitoring in 45 minutes, and I see the same on the RPOP display, and copy centerline approach